Colton Ray stood at the edge of his porch with a scoped rifle cradled in his arms. The setting sun painted his face in hard bronze. He wasn't aiming it, but his eyes were narrowed, sharp as the old combat knives stored in his barn. His jaw flexed like he was chewing glass. He'd seen something again. Or maybe someone. The edge of the woods just past the chicken coop bore signs he couldn't ignore anymore. Twice in a week now. Crushed grass. Feathers. A missing hen. And earlier that day, a child's muddy footprint near the well. Not raccoons. Not foxes. This was human. And that made it personal. He exhaled through his nose and muttered, "I don't care if it's a couple of campers. This is private land. Ain't no one invited." Colton wasn't a paranoid man. He was a prepared one. That's what he told himself anyway. Inside his cabin, every item had a place. His calendar was still pinned to March 2003, the day his son Marcus left. Every page after that remained untouched. He didn't take visitors. He didn't need friends. He had order. Until now. Bedroom then the woods. It was well past midnight when the silence snapped. Colton's ears picked it up before his eyes did. A crunch of leaves. 2 soft beeps. Flashlights. He moved like a trained soldier, rifle in hand, barefoot across the creaking floor, then down the back steps without a sound. The beams of light flickered through the dense tree line beyond the barn. A whisper. Then a giggle. Fitz? He lowered the gun for a second, then raised it again. This ain't no playground. He didn't yell. He reached for his radio. "Marnes, we've got movement. Flashlights. Backwoods, 200 yards south of the barn. Trespassers." Sheriff Hank Marnes's voice crackled back. "On my way. Don't shoot, Colton." Wasn't planning to yet. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights washed over the dark woods like a broken disco. Sheriff Marnes pulled up with 1 deputy. Colton led them to the campsite. The fire pit was still warm. And 3 kids sat huddled together behind a boulder, eyes wide and skin smeared with soot. One boy looked about 17, gaunt, but with the protective stillness of someone who'd had to grow up too soon. The second boy was smaller, maybe 14, shivering hard but refusing help. And the girl, young, no older than 12, held something tightly to her chest under a ratty hoodie. Marnes raised a brow. "Well, I'll be damned." "Didn't say anything about kids," Colton said, tight-lipped. "Still trespassing." The sheriff holstered his sidearm. "Names." The eldest stepped forward. "Nico. This is Jace. And that's Lila. Why are you out here?" A long pause. Then Nico answered quietly, "We were looking for someone." "Camping on private property ain't the way to do it," Marnes said. Lila suddenly dropped what she was holding. A folded photo that fell face down in the grass. The deputy picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of a much younger Colton Ray, 20 years ago, holding a baby in his arms, with a smiling woman beside him. Marcus's wife. Colton's breath hitched. He blinked at the photo, then looked away fast. "They're lucky I didn't shoot," he muttered. As the cruiser pulled away with the kids in the back seat, Lila looked out the window, tears streaking her cheeks. Nico sat rigid, hands clenched. Jace muttered, "I told you this was a dumb idea." But Nico didn't reply. The torn photo was gone. And so was the last bit of hope they'd brought with them. Colton stood at the porch steps, photo in hand, staring at it under the porch light. He turned it over, faded edges, bent corners, and in the corner, Marcus, 1999. He closed his eyes. He hadn't seen that woman in decades. But her smile was burned into his memory like napalm. He shoved the photo in his pocket and whispered, "What the hell's going on?" Then, without thinking, he pulled out his phone and called Sheriff Marnes again. The holding room smelled like bleach and cold metal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like flies. Nico sat on the hard bench, his elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the floor. Jace rested his head on the wall, exhausted. Lila sat cross-legged, staring at the vending machine like it might spit out a miracle. None of them spoke. Not until the door clicked. Sheriff Hank Marnes walked in, hat tucked under one arm, file folder in the other. His expression was neutral, but his eyes kept drifting toward Lila. Toward her small, pale hands clutching a threadbare backpack. He sat down slowly in front of them. You kids hungry? Silence. I asked you a question. Nico raised his head, voice hollow. We've gone longer without food than this. Marnes nodded slightly. I don't doubt that. He opened the folder. Where are your parents? A flicker, barely noticeable, in Lila's lip. Nico said, gone. How long? 5 years. Marnes's brow furrowed. Who've you been staying with? Whoever the state handed us to. Nico's tone sharpened. People who wanted the check, not the kids. Lila finally spoke. They hit Jace. Jace looked away. Marnes exhaled. Why didn't you run earlier? We didn't know where to go, Nico said. Until we found the map. Lila opened an old cardboard box in the attic of their 5th foster home. Inside, baby clothes, burned at the edges. A toy rattle. And beneath them, a wrinkled photo showing a tall man in uniform holding a baby with the same sharp chin as Nico. Taped to the back was a map. Faded. Hand-drawn. Labeled in shaky cursive, Find Ray Ranch. Jace gasped. That's Grandpa. Lila whispered, We have a family. Marnes sat at his desk, fingers drumming on the folder. He was an old-school lawman, he didn't trust tech. But something about the kids gnawed at him. Especially that photo. He unlocked his bottom drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, Colton's old medical file, one he kept on record for emergencies. Inside was a cheek swab from 2 years ago when Colton had collapsed from dehydration. They'd taken it for labs. Marnes hesitated. This wasn't standard procedure. Then he picked up the phone. Get me the state lab. I need a private DNA test. Fast. Colton sat in his recliner, boots still on, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. The torn photo sat in his hand like a live wire. He stared at it for hours. Marcus's face. The wife he swore would ruin his life. And that baby, probably Nico, looking directly at the camera. I told you she'd tear you apart, Colton muttered aloud, though Marcus was long dead. He got up and walked outside. The woods were quiet. Too quiet. He stood near the spot where the fire pit had been. There was something about that girl's eyes. They were his wife's eyes. You'll lose him if you push too hard, his wife had warned. I'm not letting him throw away his future on some waitress from Tulsa. He loves her. He doesn't know what love is. He's 19. Marcus had walked in then, fists clenched. You don't get to control me anymore. You're throwing away everything I built for you. I'm not you, Dad. Then he left. Colton never saw him again. Marnes returned. His face was different now. Tight. He handed Nico a small box of cereal. Eat. Jace opened his mouth to protest, but Nico took it. Why are you being nice now? Nico asked. Marnes sat down, watching him carefully. I ran that photo you dropped. Asked some questions. Found an old hospital record too. Jace tensed. Lila froze. Marnes paused. Colton Ray is your grandfather. Silence. Nico blinked. What? I ran a DNA test. Came back this morning. Full match. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. Jace whispered, I told you we had his nose. Colton's phone buzzed. Sheriff Marnes. He picked up. You're going to want to sit down for this, Marnes said. I'm fine standing. You're not going to be. Those kids. The pause. They're Marcus's. Silence. You're telling me those trespassers are mine? They're family, Colton. Colton said nothing. He slowly sat on the porch rail. I didn't know they were alive, he muttered. No one did. Parents died in a fire. System lost them. They came looking for you. Colton's voice cracked. I almost shot them. I know. That's why you're coming down here. Today. The old Chevy rattled over the dirt path. He hadn't driven into town in months. Maybe years. The whole way there, he gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't know if he could. The kids were brought to a visitor room. Nico's posture was a wall. Jace stayed close to Lila, who fidgeted with the sleeves of her hoodie. Then the door opened. Colton Ray stepped in. Older. Stiffer. But still the man from the photo. He looked at all three of them. No one moved. Finally, Lila whispered, "Hi." Colton cleared his throat. "Hi." No one else spoke. Nico said, "We didn't want your money." "I don't have any," Colton said. "We just didn't want to be alone anymore." Colton nodded once. "I get that." Jace tilted his head. "Do you?" Colton didn't lie. "I'm trying to." Later that day, Colton sat with Marnes in the sheriff's office. "I want to take them," he said. "You're not exactly father of the year." "I wasn't father of any year." "That's true. But I can be better." "I have to be." Marnes leaned back. "You'll need to petition the court. Social services won't like it." "They'll like them in a group home better?" Marnes shook his head. "No. They won't." Colton's jaw tightened. "Then let's start the damn paperwork." Colton Ray had worn a suit only twice in his life, once to his wife's funeral, and once to his son's graduation. Now this was the third. The collar itched, the cuffs felt tight, and the courtroom air was too clean, like a hospital. But nothing made him more uncomfortable than what sat across from him. A social worker with a clipboard, and 3 children he didn't know how to call his own. Nico's jaw was clenched. Jace kept glancing at the clock. And Lila wouldn't even meet his eyes. Judge Delancey, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, peered at Colton over thin glasses. "Mr. Ray," she said, tapping her pen, "you've lived in relative isolation for over a decade. You have no experience raising children, no active family ties, and a known temper that, while never criminal, has raised flags in your community." Colton gave a single nod. "Yes, ma'am. And yet, here you are. Why?" His voice was quiet but steady. "Because I failed my son. I don't want to fail them." The judge studied him. "And if they don't want to be with you?" He turned to the kids. "Then I'll do whatever I can to make it right from wherever they are. But I'm not going to disappear again." That was when Sheriff Marnes stood up in the back. "Your Honor, I've known Colton Ray for 40 years. He's the most stubborn, cold, and proud man I've ever met. But he keeps his word. If he says he'll take care of them, he means it." Delancey looked at the kids. "Do you wish to say anything?" Silence. Then Lila stood. Her voice was small but clear. "We don't have anyone else." Delancey leaned back. "Temporary custody granted. Review in 90 days." The gavel fell. The gate creaked open on rusted hinges. Colton's truck rolled up the dirt path slowly, like it was uncertain too. Nico sat in the front seat, silent. Jace and Lila were in the back. Jace kept one hand on his backpack like he expected to jump at any moment. Lila just stared out the window, wide-eyed at the trees, the barn, the vast land around them. Colton pointed ahead. There's the barn. Keep out of the loft unless you want a nest of hornets chewing on your face." No one laughed. He tried again. "I cleaned out the guest rooms. You each got your own bed. Sheets are new. Smell like mothballs though." Still nothing. Colton pulled up beside the porch and shut off the engine. "Let's go in." They got out wordlessly. The porch groaned under their steps. Inside, the air was cooler. But old. A small fire crackled in the hearth. Colton gestured toward it. "Figure you might be cold." Lila whispered, "It's nice." That was the first thing anyone had said since the courthouse. Colton gave a small nod and went to make tea. His hands shook a little as he filled 3 mismatched mugs. One chipped, one stained, one with an old rodeo logo. He placed them gently on the coffee table. Jace stared at his mug like it was a science experiment. Colton didn't sit. He just said, "I'll be out fixing the fence. Holler if you need anything." Then he left. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. Colton worked outside from sunrise to dusk. Fixing broken boards. Restoring the chicken coop. Replacing tools. The kids stayed inside mostly, except for Lila, who wondered a bit. She found the swing behind the barn, the overgrown garden, a bird's nest in the eaves. Jace didn't speak much but took to cleaning. He organized the pantry, cleaned the windows, and stacked books he found in the attic. Nico didn't move from his spot near the front window. Always watching. Always guarded. Colton never asked them for anything. He didn't push. But he did things. Left hot breakfast on the table. sharpened pencils and left a notepad on Lila's nightstand. Repaired a broken hinge on Jace's door without a word. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it was stable. For the first time in a long time, they were safe. One night, 2 weeks in, the silence cracked. Nico stood in the kitchen, staring at an old photo Colton had set on the shelf. Marcus, age 10, holding a baseball bat. Colton came in from the porch, hands dirty, and froze when he saw him. Nico didn't turn around. "You called the cops on us." Colton sighed. "Yeah, I did. You turned your back on your son. Then you tried to do it again with us." His voice was sharp now. "We slept in ditches. Got beaten. Starved. You were here. Comfortable. With your clean porch and your chickens." Colton swallowed. "I didn't know. But you didn't try to know." Silence. Nico turned. His eyes were glassy. "Why should we ever trust you?" Colton didn't offer excuses. He didn't defend himself. He just said, "I don't know if you should, but I'll keep showing up until maybe one day you do." After that night, things shifted. Colton began taking Jace with him to the barn. Not asking, just leaving the door open. Jace started following. They built a fence together. Repaired an old wagon. One afternoon, Jace asked, "Did my dad ride horses?" Colton nodded. "Yeah." Was scared of him at first. But he got good. "He teach you anything?" Colton chuckled. "Nope. But he stole my boots once and said they made him brave." Jace smiled. Just a flicker, but it stayed longer than usual. Lila spent most of her time with the chickens. She named them. All of them. One morning, Colton found her sobbing by the coop. He knelt beside her, confused. "What's wrong?" "She won't eat," Lila cried, holding a limp hen. Colton examined the bird. "She's sick. Could be worms. Could be old age." Lila wiped her nose. "I don't want her to die." "I know." He stood. "Let's fix up a little bed for her in the shed. Get her warm." They worked quietly together, gently laying the bird in a box lined with hay. Lila sniffled. "Thanks, Grandpa." Colton froze. She didn't repeat it, but she didn't take it back either. A week later, a thunderstorm rolled through hard. Power went out. Winds slammed against the windows. Jace lit candles. Lila curled up in a blanket. Nico paced like a caged animal. Colton finally said, "Y'all okay?" No answer. So he built a fire. Told a story about the time Marcus tried to build a treehouse and fell out of it 5 times in one afternoon. Lila laughed. Jace smirked. And Nico, quietly, sat beside them. No words. But he stayed. That was enough. The court review came and went. Full custody granted. No objections. Even the social worker smiled as she signed the final document. "You surprised me, Mr. Ray." Colton nodded. "I surprised myself too." That afternoon, Colton waited on the porch. He held a plate of awkwardly burnt cookies and 3 mugs of cocoa. Steam curled into the cold evening air. The sun was low, casting gold across the fields. He didn't call them. Didn't yell. He just waited. And then, from beyond the trees, they came. Nico walked ahead. Jace beside him. Lila trailing slightly behind, holding her sketchbook. They stopped at the gate. The same gate that had once kept them out. Now open. Colton didn't speak. He just stepped aside. Held out the cookies. And waited. 1 second. Then 3 sets of feet moved forward, crunching the gravel path. They crossed the threshold. Into something new. Something earned. Sometimes family doesn't find you. Sometimes you have to fight to find them. Please subscribe, like, comment and share for more interesting stories.